The air is thick with the scent of high-octane fuel and damp earth. We see Nicky Lauda sitting in his Ferrari, a statue of pure calculation, peering through a visor misted by his own breath. He isn't just focused, he's weighing the physics of death against the probability of a win. Nearby, James Hunt is a silhouette of restless energy inside his McLaren, his gloved hands gripping the wheel with a white-knuckled intensity. This isn't just a race, it's a collision of two worlds. Nicky views the track as a spreadsheet of risk, while James treats it like a battlefield he has to conquer to feel alive. As the engines finally scream to life, a guttural vibration that rattles the ribcage, we see the flicker of mutual recognition in their eyes through the heat haze. They aren't friends, but they are the only two people on Earth who truly understand the stakes. The green flag drops, and they vanish into a wall of grey mist. Flashback to where the poison first entered the well. Formula 3, London. James Hunt arrives like a rock star who lost his guitar, charming the crowd while dressed in a disheveled tracksuit. We see the reality of his nerves here. James ducks behind his van, doubled over as he violently vomits, his signature pre-race ritual. It's the physical manifestation of his all-or-nothing intensity. Moments later, he's on the grid, flirting with a nurse as if death isn't waiting at the first turn. Then there's Nicky, a quiet Austrian with a mechanical mind and a face that earns him the nickname the Rat. On the track, the two tangle for the first time. James makes a suicidal move, forcing Nicky off the line to take a reckless win. In the paddock afterward, Nicky confronts him, his voice cold and precise. He calls James out for being a dangerous driver. James just laughs, flashing a grin that says he'd rather crash beautifully than win boringly. It's the birth of a rivalry fueled by James's need for glory and Nicky's obsession with perfection. Nicky Lauda isn't waiting for a handout. In a move that shocks his wealthy, conservative family, he takes out a massive bank loan to buy his way into the BRM Formula 1 team. He walks into the garage not as a rookie, but as an engineer's worst nightmare. He tells the mechanics their car is a piece of sh*T, his voice devoid of emotion. He spends all night tuning the suspension, adjusting the aerodynamics, and proving that he knows the machinery better than the men who built it. When he takes the car out the next morning and shaves 2 seconds off the lap time, the team realizes he isn't just a paid driver, he's a genius. While James is out drinking and wasting his talent, Nicky is building a throne. The contrast is clear. James is chasing the lifestyle, while Nicky is chasing the machine. James Hunt is living the dream with Lord Hesketh's eccentric team. It's all champagne, caviar, and racing on a whim. They're the bubblegum team of the paddock, but James is actually winning. However, beneath the party, there's a growing desperation. James knows he's getting older, and the lifestyle is unsustainable. Meanwhile, Nicky's clinical brilliance catches the eye of Enzo Ferrari. Nicky moves to the legendary Italian team and immediately demands changes. He meets his future wife, Marlene, during a breakdown on a country road. While driving her, he shows his hidden side. He doesn't drive fast for fun, he drives fast for efficiency. He wins the 1975 World Championship with Ferrari, becoming the king of the sport. The news hits James like a physical blow. His rival is at the top of the mountain, and James is at risk of falling off the map entirely. Hesketh Racing finally runs out of money, leaving James jobless. In a stroke of luck, Emerson Fittipaldi leaves McLaren, and James maneuvers his way into the seat. It's an even playing field now, Nicky's Ferrari against James's McLaren. The 1976 season explodes with an intensity that borderlines on psychological warfare. At the Spanish Grand Prix, James takes a victory, but Nicky's team protests his car's width. James is disqualified for a mere 1.5 centimeters, and the points are handed to Nicky. The injustice burns in James's gut, fueling a darker, more volatile rage. Later, during the British Grand Prix, James wins amid a chaotic restart, but the Ferrari protests continue. When a journalist asks James if he thinks he's a better driver than Nicky, James reaches over the barrier and slugs the interviewer in the jaw, walking away as the crowd gasps. The friendship between them is now a jagged glass. Once the helmets go on, the mask of civilization vanishes. Nicky leads with clinical precision, but James is gaining momentum, fueled by a rage that has nothing to do with physics and everything to do with honor. The German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring arrives under a shroud of thick, torrential rain. Nicky calls an emergency meeting of the drivers, his face grim and drenched. He argues that the track is too dangerous to race in these conditions, the surface is slick, the visibility is zero, and the green hell offers no room for error. James, sensing Nicky is merely trying to protect his points lead, stands up and mocks him in front of the entire paddock. He calls Nicky a coward, suggesting he's lost his killer edge now that he's found domestic happiness with Marlene. The room erupts, and the vote goes against Nicky. The race is on. As they line up on the grid, the atmosphere is suffocatingly tense. Nicky's eyes are wide and focused, darting toward the gray, unforgiving sky as he senses the impending disaster. He looks over at James, who is revving his engine with reckless abandon, oblivious to anything but the first corner. This is the moment the rivalry stops being a game and starts being a tragedy. Nicky knows the math of survival is against them, but he has no choice but to drop the clutch and drive. Lap 2. The Bergwerk Curve. A rear suspension failure sends Nicky's Ferrari veering into the embankment at 140 miles per hour. The car explodes into a massive fireball, bouncing back into the middle of the track like a burning wreck. Another car slams into him at full speed, trapping Nicky in a furnace of 800 degrees. For nearly a minute, he breathes in toxic fumes and literal fire as his helmet partially melts against his skin. Other drivers dive into the flames to pull him out, risking their own lives to save a man who was being burned alive. When the word finally gets back to the pits, a heavy, suffocating silence descends over the crowd. Nicky is airlifted to the hospital, his lungs scorched by the heat and his face unrecognizable. The season, and the very soul of the sport, have changed forever in a single heartbeat of fire and twisted iron. The hospital scenes are some of the most harrowing and visceral in cinematic history. Nicky is given the last rites by a priest, but he refuses to succumb. We see the brutal, unglamorous reality of his recovery, the vacuuming of his lungs, where a tube is shoved deep into his throat to suck out the fluid, soot, and blood. It is a process of pure torture, but he endures it with a terrifying focus. He watches the races from his hospital bed, his eyes peeking out from beneath thick, blood-stained bandages. He watches James Hunt win race after race, closing the gap in the championship with every passing week. The sight of James celebrating on the podium acts like a fuel for Nicky's recovery. It isn't modern medicine that saves his life, it is pure, unadulterated spite. He forces himself to put his helmet back on over his raw, bleeding skin, screaming in primal agony as the foam lining presses against his fresh burns. He will not let James Hunt win the world title by default. He will return to the track, even if it kills him, just to prove that he is still the master of the machine. Only 6 weeks after nearly burning to death, Nicky Lauda arrives at Monza for the Italian Grand Prix. The crowd erupts in a mix of horror and awe as he removes his balaclava to reveal his scarred, red face. James is visibly stunned, his usual cocky persona stripped away. He approaches Nicky, the usual banter gone, replaced by a profound respect that borders on fear. During the race, Nicky is initially paralyzed by terror. His body is shaking uncontrollably and the smell of fuel triggers his trauma. But he breathes, centers himself, and finishes in incredible 4th place through sheer grit. James wins the race, but the entire world is talking about Nicky. The championship now comes down to the final, rain-soaked race in Japan. The world is watching, captivated by the battle between a man who literally conquered the grave and a man who is trying to outrun the shadows of his own hedonism. They are no longer just racing for a trophy, they are racing for the right to define what it means to be a champion. The final showdown. Mount Fuji is invisible, buried behind a thick, gray curtain of rain. The track is no longer a racing circuit, it's a treacherous lake of standing water. The drivers are terrified, but the commercial pressure to race is too high to ignore. As the cars splash off the line, the visibility is zero, with massive plumes of water hiding every obstacle. It's a gamble with every gear shift. James is fighting for every inch, knowing he needs a podium finish to take the title. Then, after just 2 laps of blind racing, Nicky Lauda pulls his Ferrari into the pits. He climbs out of the car, his movements slow and deliberate. His team is confused, there's no mechanical failure. Nicky just looks at the rain, thinks of Marlene, and says, "It's too dangerous." In a moment of ultimate clarity, he chooses his life over a piece of silver. He walks away through the mud and the mist, leaving the championship in James's hands. It is the bravest, most human thing he has ever done. James is completely unaware of Nicky's withdrawal or his own standing in the chaos. He pits for fresh tires late in the race, comes back out in 5th, and drives the most desperate, frantic, and reckless laps of his life. He overtakes 2 cars in the final moments, his McLaren sliding sideways through the deep puddles, crossing the line in a blur of spray. He thinks he's lost. He gets out of the car, drenched to the bone, ready to scream at his team, until they grab him and yell into his helmet, "You're third. You're the world champion." James collapses against the pit wall, the weight of the entire year finally breaking him. He's achieved his dream, but he looks empty and haunted, as if the price of winning was more than he expected to pay. In the distance, Nicky is already at the airport. There's a faint, peaceful smile on his scarred face. He lost the trophy, but he kept his soul and his life. The long, bitter chase is finally over. Weeks later, James arrives at a private airfield in his own plane, met by Nicky. James is back to his old ways, the golden boy surrounded by girls and booze. Nicky is already preparing for the next season, tinkering with an engine in the grease. They stand on the tarmac, 2 titans who have pushed each other to the very brink. Nicky tells James that he is the only person he ever truly envied for his freedom. James tells Nicky that life is for living and enjoying, not just for winning. They part ways as equals, bound by a respect that no one else in the world can share. They were 2 sides of the same coin, the fire and the ice, reminding us that sometimes, your greatest enemy is also the only person who truly understands you, and the only one who makes you great.